Section 10 of Liber Primus, first volume of the Red Book, entitled The Conception of the God. Now, in this section, there's a beautiful image included at the bottom of the middle column on page 8 of the original work, non-translated work. And the passages that come through the spirit of the depths in this section are inlaid within images. I won't, I mean, you just see that column right in front of me there. It's sort of like it's set within this ornate imagery, these words. And the importance of this is that it shows the power, the depth and significance of the two different forms of speech. So again, like at some point, I'll maybe read out the translators and editors' note, which go into this a bit. But at this point, the differences between the voices and what they say is extremely insignificant, and the context of the words, namely that he's made the effort to create these beautiful embossed drawings, which took a lot of work, make the significance of those words very apparent. It's another rather longer one. So, the conception of the God, section 10. On the second night thereafter, I spoke to my soul and said, "This new world appears weak and artificial to me. Artificial is a bad word, but the mustard seed that grew into a tree, the word that was conceived in the womb of a virgin, became a god to whom the earth was subject." This is a reference to Christ's parable, the mustard seed, Matthew 13:31-32. The kingdom of heaven is like to a grain of mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field, which indeed is the least of all seeds, but when it is grown, it is the greatest among herbs, and becometh a tree. Yeah, but the mustard seed that grew into a tree, the word that was conceived in the womb of a virgin, became a god to whom the earth was subject. Just realized something, and I'm gonna record that realization because it is significant. In yeah, it refers to chapters or episodes 6, 7, and 8 in my series on psychological types, talking about Prometheus and Epimetheus and the relations between soul and God. Importantly, in the introverted condition, the ego humbles the will to the will of the soul, and in mystical experience, transcendent experience, one becomes one soul, and there is a deeper relationship between the soul and God that transpires within such a condition. And what I've realized is that the soul in that state is equivalent to a virgin in the story of Pandora. This is, I think, Goethe's version. It's the jewel that is produced by Pandora, and it's the image of the new god. And in here it's revealed to be a word, meaning the logos. As in, one in relationship with one's soul agrees that one soul may commune, sort of gives permission or indeed consent to one soul to commune in communion with God, which is not the depths of which relationship are not necessarily available to one as ego or persona. And that is significant because in that unconscious work, epitomized in the episode of Prometheus is unconscious about Pandora. In that episode, in that work, the soul, in a sense, becomes pregnant. Um, and as it says, but the mustard seed that grew into a tree, the word that was conceived in the womb of a virgin, this is the Immaculate Conception, became a god to whom the earth was subject. And I just realize now that the renewal of God is born by the relationship of the soul and God, the soul as vessel, the soul as mediator, mediating the passage of the new God, who, as word, as logos, is then born into the world through the then creative union between oneself and one soul. And that's obviously taking me a minute to sit with. Again, this new world appears weak and artificial to me. Artificial is a bad word, but the mustard seed that grew into a tree, the word that was conceived in the womb of a virgin, became a god to whom the earth was subject, became a god to whom the earth was subject. As I spoke thus, the spirit of the depths suddenly erupted. He filled me with intoxication and mist, and spoke these words with a powerful voice. These are the embellished words, the engraved or inlaid words. I have received your sprout, you who are to come. I have received it in deepest need and lowliness. I covered it in shabby patchwork and bedded down on poor words. And mockery worshipped it, your child, your wondrous child, the child of one who is to come, who should announce the Father, a fruit that is older than the tree on which it grew. In pain will you conceive, and joyful is your birth. Fear is your herald, doubt stand to your right, disappointment to your left. We passed by in our ridiculousness and senselessness when we caught sight of you. Our eyes were blinded and our knowledge fell silent when we received your radiance. You new spark of an eternal fire, into which night were you born? You will wring truthful prayers from your believers, and they must speak of your glory in tongues that are atrocious to them. You will come over them in the hour of their disgrace, and will become known to them in what they hate, fear, and abhor. Your voice, the rarest pleasing sound, will be heard amid the stammerings of wretches, rejects, and those condemned as worthless. Your realm will be touched by the hands of those who also worshipped before the most profound lowliness, and whose longing drove them through the mud tide of evil. You will give your gifts to those who pray to you in terror and doubt, and your light will shine upon those whose knees must bend before you unwillingly, and who are filled with resentment. Your life is with he who has overcome himself. and who has disowned his self-overcoming. I also know that the salvation of mercy is given only to those who believe in the highest and faithlessly betray themselves for 30 pieces of silver. Those who will dirty their pure hands and cheat on their best knowledge against error and take their virtues from a murderer's grave are invited to your great banquet. The constellation of your birth is an ill and changing star. These, O child of what is to come, are the wonders that will bear testimony that you are a veritable God. Just on that, there are two footnotes that are relevant. The first being about this quote, you will come over them in the hour of their disgrace and will become known to them in what they hate, fear, and abhor. In Mark 16:17, Christ stated that those who believe shall speak with new tongues. The issue of speaking in tongues is discussed in 1 Corinthians 14, central to the Pentecostal movement. Also to Terence McKenna, I might add in passing. And it's not insignificant, which I will explain at a different time. Your life is with he who has overcome himself and who has disowned his self-overcoming. The theme of self-overcoming is an important one in the work of Nietzsche, and thus spake Zarathustra. Nietzsche writes, I teach you the Superman, the Übermensch. Man is something that should be overcome. What have you done to overcome him? All creatures hitherto have created something beyond themselves. And do you want to be the ebb of this great tide and return to the animals rather than overcome man? In any case, we go on reverting to the spirit, the voice of the spirit of the times, or to Jung's analysis, let's say. When my prince had fallen, the spirit of the depths opened my vision and let me become aware of the birth of the new God. The divine child approached me out of the terrible ambiguity, the hateful beautiful, the evil good, the laughable serious, the sick healthy, the inhuman healthy, and the ungodly godly. I understood that the God I understood that the God whom we seek in the absolute was not to be found in absolute beauty, goodness, seriousness, elevation, humanity, or even in godliness. Once the God was there, I understood that the new God would be in the relative, which is to say, in between. I understood that the God whom we seek, no, I understood that the new God would be in the relative. If the God is absolute beauty and goodness, how should he encompass the fullness of life, which is beautiful and hateful, good and evil, laughable and serious, human and inhuman? How can man live in the womb of the God if the Godhead himself attends only to one half of him? If we have risen near the heights of good and evil, then our badness and hatefulness lie in the most extreme torment. Man's torment is so great, and the air of the heights so weak, that he can hardly live any more. If we have ridden near the heights of good and evil, then our badness and hatefulness lie in the most extreme torment. Man's torment is so great, and the air of the heights so weak, that he can hardly live any more. The good and the beautiful freeze to the ice of the absolute idea, and the bad and hateful become mud puddles, full of crazy life. Therefore, After his death, Christ had to journey to hell. Otherwise, the ascent to heaven would have become impossible for him. Christ first had to become his Antichrist, his underworldly brother. No one knows what happened during the 3 days Christ was in hell. I have experienced it. In the corrected draft, this was replaced with, but this can be guessed. The men of yore said that he had preached there to the deceased. What they say is true, but do you know how this happened? It was folly and monkey business, an atrocious hell's masquerade of the holiest mysteries. How else could Christ have saved his Antichrist? Read the unknown books of the ancients, and you will learn much from them. Notice that Christ did not remain in hell, but rose to the heights in the beyond. Our conviction of the value of the good and beautiful has become strong and unshakable. That is why life could extend beyond this and still fulfill everything that lay bound and yearning. Our conviction of the value of the good and beautiful has become strong and unshakable. That is why life can extend beyond this. Life can extend beyond this and still fulfill everything that lay bound and yearning. But the bound and yearning is also the hateful and bad. Are you again indignant about the hateful and the bad? Through this, you can recognize how great are their force and value for life. Do you think that it is the dead in you? But this dead can also change into serpents. Do you think that it is dead in you? But this dead can also change into serpents. The draft continues, but the serpent is also life. In the image furnished by the ancients, the serpent put an end to the childlike magnificence of paradise. They even said that Christ himself had become serpent. These serpents will extinguish the prince of your days. I want to mention here the footnote. The theme of Christ's descent into hell features in several apocryphal gospels. I'd recommend Elaine Pagels. In the Apostles' Creed, it stated he descended into hell. The third day he arose again from the dead. Jung comments in Psychology and Alchemy and Mysterium Conjunctionis. Yep, Gospel of St. Peter. Christ gives a detailed description of hell. He says, commenting on the descent into hell, this is Jung, the scope of the integration is suggested by the descensus ad inferos, the descent of Christ's soul to hell, whose work of redemption also encompasses the dead. The psychological equivalent of this forms the integration of the collective unconscious, which represents an essential part of the individuation process. In 1938, noting the 3 days descent into hell during death describes the sinking of the vanished value into the unconscious, whereby conquering the power of darkness, it establishes a new order, and then rises up to heaven again. That is, attains supreme clarity of consciousness. This is the rescuing the father from the belly of the whale and rescuing the jewel from the depths. Anyway, our conviction of the value of the good and beautiful has become strong and unshakable. That is why life can extend beyond this and still fulfill everything that lay bound and yearning. But the bound and yearning is also the hateful and bad. Are you again indignant about the hateful and the bad? Through this, you can recognize how great are their force and value for life. Do you think that it is dead in you? But this dead can also change into serpents. These serpents will extinguish the prince of your days. Do you see what beauty and joy came over men when the depths unleashed this greatest war? And yet it was a frightful beginning, the beginning of hell. It means First World War. If we do not have the depths, how do we have the heights? Yet you fear the depths, and you do not want to confess that you are afraid of them. It is good, though, that you fear yourselves. Say it out loud, that you are afraid of yourselves. It is wisdom to fear oneself. Only the heroes say that they are fearless, but you know what happens to the hero. With fear and trembling, look around yourselves with mistrust. Go thus into the depths, but do not do this alone. But do not do this alone. Two or more is greater security, since the depths are full of murder. Also secure yourselves the way of retreat. Go cautiously as if you were cowards, so that you preempt the soul murderers. The depths would like to devour you whole and choke you in mud. He who journeys to hell also becomes hell. Therefore, do not forget from whence you come. The depths are stronger than us, so do not be heroes. Be clever and drop the heroics, since nothing is more dangerous than to play the hero. The depths want to keep you. They have not returned very many up to now, and therefore men fled from the depths and attacked them. What if the depths, due to the assault, now change themselves into death? But the depths indeed have changed themselves into death. But the depths indeed have changed themselves into death. But the depths indeed have changed themselves into death. Therefore, when they awoke, they inflicted a thousandfold death. We cannot slay death, as we have already taken all life from it. If we still want to overcome death, then we must enliven it. Therefore, on your journey, be sure to take golden cups full of the sweet drink of life, red wine, and give it to dead matter, so that it can win life back. The dead matter will change into black serpents. Do not be frightened. The serpents will immediately put out the sun of your days, and a night with wonderful will-o'-the-wisps will come over you. This refers to descent into hell in the future. And in 1940, Jung wrote, the threat to one's innermost self from dragons and serpents points to the danger of the newly acquired consciousness being swallowed up again by the instinctive soul, the unconscious. Do not be frightened. The serpents will immediately put out the sun of your days, and a night with wonderful will-o'-the-wisps will come over you. Take pains to waken the dead. Dig deep mines and throw in sacrificial gifts so that they reach the dead. Reflect in good heart upon evil. This is the way to ascent. But before the ascent, everything is night and hell. What do you hell? What do you think of the essence of hell? Hell is when the depths come to you with all that you no longer are or are not yet capable of. Hell is when you can no longer attain what you could attain. Hell is when you must think and feel and do everything that you know you do not want. Hell is when you know that your having to is also a wanting to, and that you yourself are responsible for it. Hell is when you know that everything serious that you have planned with yourself is also laughable, that everything fine is also brutal, that everything good is also bad, that everything high is also low, and that everything pleasant is also shameful. But the deepest hell is when you realize that hell is also no hell, but a cheerful heaven, not a heaven in itself, but in this respect to heaven, and in that respect to hell. That is the ambiguity of the God. He is born from a dark ambiguity and rises to a bright ambiguity. Unequivocalness is simplicity and leads to death. But ambiguity is the way of life. Jung wrote in 1952, the language I speak must be equivocal, that is ambiguous, to do justice to psychic nature with its double aspect. I strive consciously and deliberately for ambiguous expressions, because it is superior to unequivocalness and corresponds to the nature of being. I would mention here in passing Catafalque, Peter Kingsley, on this theme in the Pre-Socratics. And in my own work, I have to say, but let's move on. That is the ambiguity of God, of the God. He is born from a dark ambiguity and rises to a bright ambiguity. Unequivocalness is simplicity and leads to death, but ambiguity is the way of life. If the left foot does not move, then the right one does, and you move. The God wills this. The draft continues. Look at the images of the gods that the ancients and the men of old left behind. Their nature is ambiguous and equivocal. You say, the Christian God is unequivocal. He is love. 1 John 4:16, God is love, and he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in God, and God in him. But what is more ambiguous than love? Love is the way of life, but your love is only on the way of life if you have a left and a right. Nothing is easier than to play at ambiguity, and nothing is more difficult than living ambiguity. He who plays is a child. His God is old and dies. He who lives is awakened. His God is young and goes on. He who plays hides from the inner death. He who lives feels the going onward and immortality. So leave the play to the players. Let fall what wants to fall. If you stop it, it will sweep you away. There is a true love that does not concern itself with neighbors. The giraffe continues, whoever reverses this word and others that I speak is a player. Since he doesn't respect the spoken word, know that you attain yourself from what you read in a book. You read as much into a book as out of it. There is a true love that does not concern itself with neighbors. Excuse me. When the hero was slain and the meaning recognized in the absurdity, when all tension came rushing down from gravid clouds, when everything had become cowardly and looked to its own rescue, I became aware of the birth of the God. Corrected draft has conception of a God. Opposing me, the God sank into my heart when I was confused by mockery and worship, by grief and laughter, by yes and no. Opposing me, the God sank into my heart when I was confused by mockery and worship, grief and laughter, by yes and no. It's so important. The one arose from the melting together of the two. He was born as a child from my own human soul, which had conceived him with resistance, like a virgin. Thus it corresponds to the image that the ancients have given to us. Reference to the Virgin Mary. But when the mother, my soul, was pregnant with the God, I did not know it. It even seemed to me as if my soul herself was the God, although he lived only in her body. And thus the image of the ancients is fulfilled. I pursued my soul to kill the child in it. For I am also the worst enemy of my God. But I also recognize that my enmity is decided upon in the God. He is mockery and hate and anger, since this is also a way of life. I must say that the God could not come into being before the hero had been slain. The hero, as we understand him, has become an enemy of the God, since the hero is perfection. The gods envy the perfection of man, because perfection has no need of the gods. But since no one is perfect, we need the gods. The gods love perfection because it is the total way of life. But the gods are not with him who wishes to be perfect, because he is an imitation of perfection. In 1916, Jung wrote, "Man has one ability which, though it is of the greatest utility for collective purposes, is the most pernicious for individuation, and that is imitation. Collective psychology can hardly dispense with imitation." Jung wrote in 1940 about the danger of identifying with the hero. "This identity is often very extremely stubborn and dangerous for the equilibrium of the soul. If the identity can be dissolved, the figure of the hero, through the reduction of consciousness to a human level, can gradually be differentiated into a symbol of the self." I must say that the god could not come into being before the hero had been slain. The hero, as we understand him, has become an enemy of the god, since the hero is perfection. The gods envy the perfection of man, because perfection has no need of the gods. But since no one's perfect, we need the gods. The gods love perfection because it's a total way of life. But the gods are not with him who wishes to be perfect, because he is an imitation of perfection. Imitation was a way of life when men still needed the heroic prototype. The monkey's manner is a way of life for monkeys, and for man as long as he is like a monkey. Human apishness has lasted a terribly long time, but the time will come when a piece of that apishness will fall away from men. That will be a time of salvation and the dove in the eternal fire, and redemption will descend. Then there will no longer be a hero, and no one who can imitate him. And no one who can imitate him. Because from that time henceforth, all imitation is cursed. The new God laughs at imitation and discipleship. He needs no imitators and no pupils. He forces men through himself. The God is his own follower in man. He imitates himself. Mention here in passing Morris Berman, Coming to Our Senses, in the first chapter, which is about the origins of self-consciousness in relation to the mirror and animals. It's a really excellent discussion. The new God laughs at imitation and discipleship. He needs no imitators and no pupils. He forces men through himself. The God is his own follower in man. He imitates himself. We think that there is singleness within us and communality outside us. Outside of us is the communal in relation to the external, while singleness refers to us. We are single if we are in ourselves, but communal in relation to what is outside us. But if we are outside of ourselves, then we are single and selfish in the communal. But if we are outside of ourselves, then we are single and selfish in the communal. Our self suffers privation if we are outside ourselves, and thus it satisfies its need with communality. Consequently, communality is distorted into singleness. If we are in ourselves, we fulfill the need of the self, we prosper, and through this we become aware of the needs of the communal and can fulfill them. If we set a God outside of ourselves, he tears us loose from the self. Since the God is more powerful than we are, our self falls into privation. But if the God moves into the self, he snatches us from what is outside us. He commented on in 1916 in Individuation and Collectivity, Collected Works 18, that the individual must now consolidate himself by cutting himself off from God and becoming wholly himself. Thereby, and at the same time, he also separates himself from society. Outwardly, he plunges into solitude, but inwardly into hell, distance from God. If we set a God outside of ourselves, he tears us loose from the self, since the God is more powerful than we. Our self falls from what is outside us. our self falls into privation, but if the God moves into the self, he snatches us from what is outside us. We arrive at singleness in ourselves. So the God becomes communal in reference to what is outside us, but single in relation to us. No one has my God, but my God has everyone, including myself. The gods of all individual men always have all other men, including myself. So it is always only the one God, despite his multiplicity. You arrive at him in yourself, and only through yourself, seizing you. It seizes you in the advancement of your life. The hero must fall for the sake of our redemption, since he is the model and demands imitation. But the measure of imitation is fulfilled. It's an interpretation of the murder of Siegfried. Measure of imitation is fulfilled. We should become reconciled to solitude in ourselves and to the God outside of us. We should become reconciled to solitude in ourselves and to the God outside of us. If we enter into this solitude, then the life of the God begins. If we are in ourselves, then the space around us is free, but filled by the God. If we are in ourselves, then the space around us is free, but filled by the God. Our relations to men go through this empty space. Our relations to men go through this empty space and also through the God. But earlier it went through selfishness, since we were outside ourselves. Therefore, the Spirit foretold to me that the cold of outer space will spread across the earth. Therefore, the Spirit foretold to me that the coal of outer space will spread across the earth. With this, he showed me in an image that the God will step between men and drive every individual with the whip of icy cold to the warmth of his own monastic hearth, because people were beside themselves, going into raptures like madmen. Selfish desire ultimately desires itself. You find yourself in your desire, so do not say that desire is vain. If you desire yourself, you produce the divine Son in your embrace with yourself. Your desire is the father of the God. Yourself is the mother of the God. But the Son is the new God, your master. If you embrace yourself, then it will appear to you as if the world has become cold and empty. The coming God moves into this emptiness. If you embrace yourself, then it will appear to you as if the world has become cold and empty. The coming God moves into this emptiness. If you are in your solitude, and all the space around you has become cold and unending, then you have moved far from men, and at the same time, you've come near to them as never before. Selfish desire only apparently led you to men, but in reality it led you away from them, and in the end to yourself, which to you and to others was the most remote. But now, if you are in solitude, your God leads you to the God of others, and through that, to the true neighbor, to the neighbor of the self in others. Selfish desire only apparently led you to men, but in reality it led you away from them, and in the end to yourself, which to you and to others was the most remote. But now, if you are in solitude, your God leads you to the God of others, and through that to the true neighbor, to the neighbor of the self in others. If you are in yourself, you become aware of your incapacity. You will see how little capable you are of imitating the heroes and of becoming a hero yourself. So you will also no longer force others to become heroes. Like you, they suffer from incapacity. Incapacity, too, wants to live. but it will overthrow your gods. That being the 10th section in the first volume of the Red Book Liber Primus, which was entitled The Conception of the God. I wanted to also mention, and this is a funny place to include it, at the very beginning, the let me see, it's the image at the top of the second section, which is entitled, let me just make sure I get it right. Excuse me, it's actually included within the first section, namely the way of what is to come. And it's at the beginning of it's the after the first page, it's the top of the second page in the original Red Book, and which begins, "If I speak in the spirit of this time, I must say, no one and nothing can justify what I must proclaim to you." And in that image, there appears to be, let me even try to, I don't know mm, if that little W there, and I can't exactly, hang on, this is a terrible way of presenting this, but I want to show you. It's going to be impossible to see. But, right there, that, if I'm not mistaken, is a mushroom. I'm not going to say anything else about that right now.